quality corporate training meets powerful AI. Docebo is the world's first generative AI learning platform. You can customize the learning experience and create content in seconds. Learn more at docebo.com.
On April 24, 2013, the 23-year-old Sheila Begum wakes up at the crack of dawn. She has breakfast and leaves for work. Sheila makes her way across the capital of Bangladesh, Dacca, through the early morning traffic all the way to the factory. It's a textile factory which makes clothes. Sheila started out as an assistant, and her first job was just to cut any strands of thread pulling out at the hems. Now, however, she's been promoted to seamstress. She works 6 days a week, 10 hours a day. When Sheila gets to work that day, she and the other workers don't want to go inside. The day before, the building, called Rana Plaza, was evacuated because of some cracks in the walls. The stores and the bank on the other floors have closed down. Sheila doesn't feel safe at the idea of walking inside. Nobody does. But the workers are being threatened. If they refuse to work, they'll be docked a month of pay. Forced to move on, the workers take their places. Sheila sits at her station. She probably forces herself not to look at the walls, and she starts sewing. Just a few minutes later, her entire world starts to tremble. It's 8:45. The floor caves in, and the ceiling above Sheila's head crashes down. It's utter chaos on the 8 floors of the Rana Plaza, while the entire building crumbles. There will be no pants or shirts for the shopping malls of Europe and the USA today. Low-cost and identical clothes that aren't made to last. Cheap and disposable. These collections are launched on the market to be snatched up, used up, and tossed away. It's called fast fashion, and it's emblematic of the times that we live in. I am Guido Brera, and you're listening to Black Box, The Hidden Side of Finance, a podcast from Cora Media. The Rana Plaza collapsed that morning of 2013. Sheila Begum and the other workers found themselves buried in the rubble after being forced to work under the threat of losing a month of wages, which amounts to around 38 euros for 10 hours of work a day, 6 days a week. Sheila survived. She's one of the 2,515 wounded. But another 1,134 people died in that hellhole. 1,134 people who got up at dawn, had breakfast, and left their homes to make budget clothes for our Western market. The survivors will describe the collapse of the Rana Plaza as a sort of earthquake. The sounds of destruction, the crash of walls and ceilings, the helplessness, the terror, the adrenaline in the bodies of people clamoring for an escape. It was carnage, but it wasn't a mere blameless natural disaster. It wasn't even an unforeseeable event. The greatest industrial disaster in the history of the textile industry was the fault of an unsustainable development model. In social and human terms, the collapse of the Rana Plaza was another symbol of our modern age. From the heights of our privilege here in the West, The fall of that building on the outskirts of the empire in 2013 almost seems a sort of anthill. An underground and invisible city, bustling with activity, run by thousands of nameless beings. But we can't be so foolish that we are blind to the fact that all those people were working for us, to make clothes that we would then buy for cheap and perhaps wear just a few times. 10 years have passed since that event, and we still have to face one question without an answer. It's a hard one, because it puts our entire lifestyle in doubt. What's the real price of our clothes? For the people that make them and the environment. We often say, "Put yourself in my shoes," when we invite someone to take our point of view, to see where we're coming from. But if we truly want to answer that difficult question, first of all, we have to accept the fact that our shoes are filthy, and we have to understand how the economic model of the 21st century reflects on the fashion industry. This model is unsustainable, and we can no longer accept it. Fast fashion. This expression was used for the first time in a New York Times article of December 31st, 1989, the last day of a crucial decade for our present. The Berlin Wall had just come down, and neoliberists had become the prophets of this new day. At the base of fast fashion is an idea that everyone could agree upon: selling clothes at a price that anyone could afford. And so, some brands started to recreate at budget prices the latest trends of high fashion. Teams of collections were launched onto the market each year. Fast fashion is quick, in more ways than one. It's quick to the market and quick to sell. A client chooses something they like, and they buy it just as quickly, incentivized by the low price tag and the fear of missing out. But the clothes are used up fast as well, and then thrown away. We often confuse accessibility with equality. We seldom realize that often a low price means that the person who made that product has been paid less as well. Or that the clothing uses cheap petrol-based synthetic materials. For example, polyester costs half the price of cotton, but the difference is damaging to the environment. As a result, fast fashion today produces 100 billion items of clothing each year. The number is unimaginable for our new century. It's madness. And this madness is an antidote to the malaise of the middle class, the main customer base, which can no longer afford to buy a house or pay for higher education, but instead can console itself with buying 2 t-shirts a week. Fixing a piece of clothing is more expensive than just purchasing a new one from a new collection. From the moment someone shows up at the cash register, fast fashion follows its usual cycle. Buy, use, dispose, at a toxic pace. This is a global trend, and to see another side, we need to travel to Chile, at the outskirts of Alto Hospicio, a city at the margins of the Atacama Desert. It's the last stop for fast fashion, as it leaves countries such as the Bangladesh of Sheila and the other workers of Rana Plaza, and it makes its way to Europe and the USA where the clothes are sold, to then end up in places like this. The city of Alto Hospicio is close to Iquique, a duty-free port for international goods. Every year, around 60,000 tons of clothes pass through Chile. Some of these are secondhand, but most of them are unsold. They've never been worn. It's a staggering amount. A few of these are put back on the market, sold in South America after being discarded by the West, but many more of them are simply dumped into landfills. The largest of these is in Alto Hospicio, in the desert of Atacama, a mountain of discarded clothes in the dry plains, a patchwork of colors in the sandy yellow uniformity, and so full of plastics that it's become a pollution bomb. Freud would say that this landfill in the desert is the repression of the West, the place where we cast away that which we don't want to consciously see. That mountain of synthetic fabrics which grows in the desert of Atacama is our dirty laundry. What's the real price of fast fashion? How can we build a future which is better, more ethical, and sustainable for fashion? And more in general, how can we accept the suffering and inequality that comes from an economic model which is ready to sacrifice the environment, the planet, and our very own lives in the name of profit? It's been more than 10 years since the collapse of Rana Plaza, which has killed 1,134 people and left over 2,500 wounded and traumatized forever. Today, Sheila Begum is no longer a seamstress. She can't even sew anymore. When the building fell, she broke 3 vertebrae and she lost the use of her right hand. She's unemployed, she can't pay her daughter's tuition, and she reported last spring in an interview with Nikkei Asia that the survivors of Rana Plaza are slowly dying. In the last decade, we've started to open our eyes to the issue. New movements have come around that fight for living salaries, for safe and humane work conditions. We've seen movements against the damage caused by fast fashion and startups that recycle used and unsold clothes. But the road is ongoing, and we've just taken our first few steps so that no one is again allowed to work in crumbling buildings, and so that landfills of dirty clothes stop polluting the air. So that we can respect the planet once more and find a balance that prioritizes that which is truly important. Black Box is a Cora News podcast, produced by Cora Media and sponsored by Docebo. Written by Guido Brera with I Diavoli. Editorial supervision by Francesca Milano. Intro and sound design by Luca Micheli. Editing and post-production by Luca Micheli and Emanuele Moscatelli. Production organization by Alex Peverengo.